Hi there. In our lesson today, we're going to learn about present perfect and how we can use it in our sentences. So stay tuned. Okay, so what is present perfect? The present perfect is a verb tense which is used to show that an action has taken place once or many times before now. The present perfect is formed from the present tense of the verb have and the past participle of the verb. Now, the structure of the sentence is at the beginning of the sentence, you would have your subject, followed by has or have. Whether you want to use has or have, it all depends on your subject. Then, you would have past participle form of the verb after has or have. For example, in this sentence, he has watched the movie twice. Now, in this sentence, he is the subject there. So for this one, we have to go with has. Remember this. Whether you want to use has or have, it all depends on your subject. Okay, now we have the past participle form of the verb. Now, the main verb in this sentence is watch. Now, as we all know, watch is a regular verb. Now, the rule for regular verb is the past simple form and the past participle form would be the same. You just have to add ed to the infinitive. Alright? Now, once you have all the subject verb agreement followed, you should be able to complete your sentence. You should be able to write a perfect present perfect tense. So, when do we use this form of verb tense? And what are the conditions that allow us to use it? So, there are two conditions which we can use this present perfect tense. The first one is if we want to talk about an event that started in the past and it continues into the present. For example, the sentence, he has been working there for 10 years now. Okay, from the sentence, we know that the person started working there 10 years ago and still do. It continues up into the present. Another condition in which we can apply this form of verb tense in our conversation is when we are talking about our experience up to the present. For example, this sentence, I have always been afraid of height. Now, from this sentence, we know that the person is afraid of height and has always been afraid of it since always. Now, let's look at the exercise and see how well we understand this topic. For this, I need you to open up your Pulse Toolbook and turn to page 76. If you don't have it, you can refer to your English module. Okay, now let's start with the first exercise. Read the instruction for exercise 1. The instruction is, look at the table and answer the questions. So there are two questions that you need to answer. The first question is, what are of and as short for? And the second question is, what do we add to the end of regular verbs in the present perfect? I'm gonna give you some time to figure out the answers for the two questions, and then we'll come back to the questions. The answers for the two questions are A. They are spoken form or short form for have and has. And for B, we add ed to the back of the regular verbs. Let's try exercise 2. The instruction is to read the spelling rules on page 83 and look at the irregular verbs list on page 126. Then you have to write the past participles of these verbs. Now, check your answers. I'm sure by now you have completed exercise 2. Now let's look at exercise 3. Now for this one, you'll need to read the sentences about Andrew Miller and circle the correct words. Now remember this, your subject would determine whether you should use have or has in the sentence. Now, check your answers. Well, I think by now you should be able to use has or have correctly in present perfect sentences. So I'm going to let you work on exercise 4 and 5 on your own. And then we'll move on to the next part of this lesson, which is how we can form questions with present perfect tense. How can we form questions with present perfect tense? Okay, in this lesson, we are going to continue with our grammar lesson on present perfect. We are going to learn how we can form present perfect questions and how we can answer them. So let's begin with exercise 1. Now, without wasting any time, let's look at activity 1. Okay, let's read the instruction together. The instruction is try to complete the table with driven, has, and haven't. Okay, so this is how you would write the present perfect questions. First, you would start off with has or have, depending on your subject. So once you have has or have in place, you would have your subject. Good. Okay, so first you're gonna have your has or have, and then the subject followed by the past participle form of the main verb. For example, the ones that I have here is have I driven along Route 66, or have we driven along Route 66. Now, whether you want to use has or have, it depends on your, very good, your subject. Now that we have understand the concept, now let's look at activity 2. So in this activity 2, I want you to try to reorder the jumbled words to make questions about Route 66. Then you write true short answers for them for all the questions. Remember last week we have read about this Route 66, right? If you can recall. Okay. So now let's look at the example here. The words are Route 66, famous, become, and has. Remember that if you want to ask question in present perfect tense, you need to start off with has or have. So in this case, we're going to start with has. Okay, so we have has at the beginning of our questions. Now, what comes after has or have? We have the subject. So now, let's identify which one is the subject in this in the list of words. Now, I can say that Route 66 is the subject. So now we have has Route 66. So what comes after the subject? We would have the main verb. Now the main verb has to be in its past participle form. Now, can you identify the verb in the sentence? In the list of words, sorry. Okay, very good. Become is the main verb there. So now you have as Route 66 become. Now, you need to complete the sentence. You need to complete your question. So the last word that we have there is famous. So you can complete it with as Route 66 become famous. So that is the correct question. Now, how would you answer to that? You would answer it with a yes, a simple yes, or no. In this case, we are going to answer it with yes, it has. So how do I answer that kind of question? Now, let's take a look at the structure. First off, you would start answering the question with a yes or a no. And then you would have your subject, alright? And then you would complete it with have or have not, or has not, depending on your subject, okay? Now remember, you can use contraction haven't or hasn't for negative answers, but you can't use them for positive answers, okay? Now that we have completed exercise 2, let's take a look at activity 3 now. Okay, now for this part, we are going to learn where we can put ever in our sentences. Okay, so for this part, we need to add the word ever somewhere in the present perfect questions. But where? Where can we add this ever? Okay, now let's look at the example that I have. Now, for this kind of questions, you need to look at the structure of your questions. First, you has or have, and then followed by the subject and your past participle. Now, in this case, ever here would fit in between the subject and the past participle form of the main verb. Okay, so first you have has, followed by the subject, followed by ever, followed by the past participle form of the main verb. Okay, it has to be in between the subject and the past participle form of the main verb. For example, in this question, have you ever driven the car? Okay, have, you is the subject, followed by ever, driven is the past participle form of the main verb. So there you have it. Okay, it has to be in between the subject and the past participle form of the main verb. Now, we often use ever in present perfect questions to mean at some time in your life. We're asking, have you ever? Have you done something in your life? Okay? The opposite of ever is never. The negative of ever is never. For example, the question that I want to ask you is, have you ever driven a car? So let's just say that you haven't driven a car before. So you would answer it with this short answer: no, I have never driven a car. Okay, or I've never driven a car. Remember, in this case, you can use contraction. I've. Okay. I'm going to give you some time for you to complete this exercise, and you can check your answers at the end of the lesson. So we have come to the end of our lesson today. I hope you have learned a thing or two about this present perfect, and I hope you'll be able to use it in your conversation and also in your writing. So thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you again.